Hello friends, Professional Aghanim Labyrinth player here, bringing you another Dota 2 video in which we're going to be talking about one of the absolute most ridiculous heroes in patch 7.27b. This hero, Clinkz, is being spammed by a lot of professional players, including CCNC, Calm, Cool, and Collected, and Quinn Callahan. All of these players are playing this hero because its win rate has shot up by about 8% on Dota buff in the last few hours. That is completely ridiculous. That is definitely warranting some nerfs, and even after nerfs, it's still going to be good. So let's take a look at how exactly CCNC plays Clinkz in this patch. So here we have a replay on Dota buff of a game where CCNC played Clinkz. It went to super late game, so we can see what his item choices were. Unfortunately, the talents and skills have not been updated on Dota buff. That is how early we are in terms of this patch just came out. But with that being said, we can see the items here. And before we get into the actual replay, there are a couple of things I want to clarify with the actual patch notes on Clinkz. So the first thing is that skeleton walk. When you read this, it's like it was automatically generated by Valve based on the ability, and it doesn't say, hey, this was changed. So it says Skeleton Walk now provides invisibility, as if it didn't, but we all know it did, and 15% through 60% move speed. And so when I first read this, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, they're just basically reading what the ability does. But I tried it in-game, and I noticed that once this was maxed out and I just had boots on Clinkz, I was basically haste and move speed. And the reason for this is because before, luckily, the Dota wiki actually hasn't been updated yet either, the move speed on the old ability was 45%. So he just straight up got a 15% move speed bonus, which is quite insane, especially when you consider that during the Skeleton Walk, you can now cast spells, including Death Pact, his ultimate. And it's also worth noting that the skeletons, and as well as the skeleton that is summoned from your level 10 talent, they last a minute, which is a very long time, and they have 1,000 health, which means if you eat them with Death Pact, and you have Death Pact maxed out with the 25 talent, you basically get rapier damage from the skeletons, and you get plus 1,000 HP. I think it's, let me see, so 100%, you get more than 1,000 HP. You get 1,500. It is absolutely wild how much damage and HP this hero has in the late game with no items. And it's just not 100% clear when reading this the first time. At least it wasn't clear to me. So in this game, the item build, or sorry, the skill build we'll go over first that CCNC went for is he went 2 points in arrows just for laning, and then 2 points in strafe. At about level 4, that's kind of when you consider, the runes are spawning, the laning stage is maybe breaking down a little bit. He goes for a value point in Invis. Then at level 6, he gets Death Pact. He goes for Death Pact at every single possible level, and we'll see exactly why in the replay. Then he maxes out this Skeleton Walk because having the 60% move speed is honestly unreal. In the game, in this particular game, he went for the mana regen talent, which it doesn't show up on Dota buff yet. I've seen people go for the skeleton as well, especially if they get an early Orchid, because then they don't have any mana issues. Then he maxes out the searing arrows, and then finally he goes for strafe last. And we'll look at the other talents in game. Item-wise, probably the most important thing is that he goes for an early Soul Ring. He goes for typical mid items. Everybody goes for, the Wraith Band and then the early casual Blightstone. If you're a hero that's going to build Deso, it's just so efficient to get that early. Then he goes for Soul Ring, prioritizes mana regen, neutral items early, buys a bunch of clarities, goes for treads. After that, he goes for Deso. I think if he was against some Storm Spirit, he'd probably go for an early Orchid. Then he goes for BKB because he's against magic damage. Then he goes for Nullifier. I think this is very likely to almost always be like a third item on Clinkz. I just think this item is completely broken right now. The damage for cost is way too much, and it cannot be dispelled by BKB. That is completely wild. After that, he goes for Bloodthorn because good lord, you do so much damage, so just amplifying and making all of those hits crit as well as True Strike is not okay. After that, he goes for Satanic and Scotty, and at this point, you are an unkillable monster that does 1 billion damage. It is nuts. So the very first thing of note that he does in this game is he places a mid ward that will scout high ground here. And I think this is really important because Clinkz is a ranged hero who doesn't really have a great way of securing ranged creeps without having the Death Pact as a basic ability. So it makes a lot of sense that he's going to want to right-click this Invoker uphill, and that he's going to want to, see where the Invoker is so that he can walk up and maybe snipe a ranged creep. So what he's doing to the naked eye might look like literally nothing. But the reason that he's standing here and not walking back to base is because this is like the halfway point between, not exactly the halfway point, but he's close enough to the base that he can stay here for a long time and then eventually walk back and block, and he's not going to be late for his block. But he's also close enough to this ward that if somebody comes up here and tries to do the trick to deward this using the tower aggro and these little hidden shadow spots here, he can walk up and start right-clicking them, and that's going to make it impossible for anybody to tell if there's a ward here or not. So the second cool thing that CCNC does is another thing that if you watched it in-game with your naked eye and you weren't looking at his player perspective, you would think that he just messed up his block and that it wasn't intentional, but when you look at his player perspective, it is very clear that it's intentional. And so what he does here, the way that he body blocks, by the way, for anybody wondering, is he locks his camera to his hero, and then he lets the range creep go first. And the moment his range creep is ahead of the melee creeps, he doesn't even bother blocking anymore. He instantly unlocks his camera from his hero, and he starts looking around the map. So why does he do this? He does this because he wants the creep wave to push into the enemy. The range creep will die first, and then it will push back into his tower. And so what this lets him do is he knows that since his range creep is dying first, he is going to just be able to beat the crap out of this invoker, and he's not going to miss any last hits because none of his creeps are going to die, or none of the creeps that he's trying to last hit are going to die because the range creep is dying, and that's doing the most damage. So this lets him just beat the living crap out of this invoker, even getting the range creep deny, which I think is just very solid timing. Invoker pulls this into tower, and Invoker is not particularly good at last hitting under tower. He does get it because this guy is, of course, also a good player. CCNC uses his searing arrows to get the range creep. That's a classic tactic. And now exactly what he wanted to happen does happen. Now it is pushed under CCNC's tower, and he's going to freely be able to last hit all of these creeps because he has searing arrows. So the next thing that I found really interesting about this replay is that the moment Mr. Callahan here gets level 6, and the siege wave is dealt with, he just immediately moves into the jungle, starts death pacting and killing creeps, sending out his soul ring as soon as possible on the courier, even before boots, and he gives his support the lane. So what this does is, obviously he's going to be farming in the jungle just about as much as he'll be farming in the lane, and he only heads back to aid in defending the tower. That is the only reason that he's here. And if he's in the jungle, which he does move back to, sending out a mango, then he knows that Tiny is not going to be able to kill him because it's going to be just Tiny in the jungle alone, and if Invoker heads over, it's really obvious. So Lion is in this dangerous position mid, but Lion is also farming and getting XP that he wouldn't, and as a result, Invoker actually leaves mid, and all of a sudden Tiny's here, and this choice to go to the jungle, it may seem, once again, kind of small, but it breaks the entire laning stage down. Because now you have Lion comes mid, because Lion is mid, Invoker starts rotating, and then because Invoker starts rotating, Tiny comes mid, and then because Tiny comes mid, CCNC can come here and set up for a kill on him. And that is all from the decision of CCNC just saying, hey, I jungle quickly. I'm going to go jungle, Lion take mid. So that's incredibly important in your pubs. If you're ever wondering, why are your supports always so underleveled? Why are they always feeding? It's because you aren't doing this. So in this particular game, CCNC is in an interesting predicament where his team isn't exactly ready to farm, and he's still looking to be active on the map, though. He wants to do things. He's a do shit hero. He is not a do nothing hero. And so I think this is probably relatable for a lot of people because even in, high immortal games, you have people that just AFK jungle. So what do? Well, you don't just go say, hey, you guys are jungling, I'm going to jungle too. You kind of can, but you'll see exactly what I mean by that. So what he does is he runs around on Clinkz, who is a fighting hero, and he looks for opportunities. This ability has 60% move speed. He is basically hasted. This is bugged out. He is basically hasted at the moment. He's got a soul ring for infinitely spamming this out. So he does infinitely spam it out. And he plays extremely aggressively. He plays in the enemy's face. He waits for stragglers to be out of position. He goes for enemy bounty runes. If he does jungle, he tries to prioritize the enemy jungle first and take farm away from them. So the next play that Quinn is about to make is basically what he rinses and repeats for the entirety of the rest of the game when his team isn't ready to fight. We'll take a look at what he does in team fights afterwards, but when they're not ready to fight, he basically controls the game by running at heroes that are isolated. And if he doesn't know if heroes are isolated, he tries to scout to see if they are. He tries to give his team information. So if you're the type of person that really likes to dictate the pace of the game, I think this hero is absolutely the hero for you. And the reason this makes so much sense in the current patch, by the way, to play like he's playing right now, is because it's really hard to end the game right now, mostly because this outpost. This outpost cannot be taken until you take a tier 2. And then taking tier 2s and taking tier 3s, man, that's been hard forever, especially with repair kits being in the game. And these heroes that can defend towers infinitely like Rubik and Veno and stuff like that. So it's very hard to high ground. So you have this very split map. People are constantly in all the lanes and all the jungles. And Clinkz loves that. He loves the ability to just hunt people down and isolate people. But he waits. He doesn't try to do it by himself. If it's a hero that he's not sure if he can kill, he just stays on them. He just stays in front of them, keeps vision of them, and waits for his supports. And he pings. And then he goes. And at the very least, what this is going to do is the enemy team is not going to position aggressively like this, farming, because they're going to be afraid, okay, where is this Clinkz at? Is he going to be killing me in a couple of seconds if I farm here? So the way that CCNC plays team fights is pretty interesting. He always stays away from his team, and he tends to go for the backlines, which I think is, relatively obvious. But with that being said, he doesn't do that with his team. Once he has the nullifier, and I imagine if he had like a Deso or an Orchid, he would probably do this as well. It just depends on the item advantage that he has. But once he has these items, he makes sure to kind of play almost as a forward scout and backliner, person that's killing the backline. I think the reason that he can do this is because this hero has so much damn HP at this point. And of course, he can kill a hero like Jahiro, absolutely no problem with the nullify. So you can see here that he lets TB be the kind of central hero that people are going to play around. And he is the kind of ganker and scout. So he's paying close attention to where the TB is, almost using him as a tower, but he is out of the pit and he is looking for kills. And so once he has the nullifier, he will go on heroes that are incredibly tanky that when he had the Deso, he wasn't going for unless he had his team with him. And I think the reason for that is just because once you pick this up, you can kill almost anybody. So basically that process is just rinsed and repeated until the Radiant all buy back and then they die and then boom, 40k gold lead. All of a sudden we have this standoff where they just sit on their high ground until they eventually lose. You guys know the patch. It's basically the same thing in terms of the progression of the game. But I do want to look at the late game talents and items of CCNC. Really the only things that super stand out to me as important are just the items in general. I think the order in which you build them will probably differ game by game, but I think Nullifier is incredibly broken on this hero, and you want to go for this every single game if possible. I think that, as well as, of course, a Bloodthorn. The talents, he goes for kind of the basic bitch talents. He doesn't go for the cool new fancy ones like Skeleton Walk, Exit, Summons a Burning Skeleton, 10-second Skeleton Walk cooldown to pair with that, Kills, Reset, Death Pack. He doesn't go for those. And what that shows to me is that CCNC thinks that the skill reworks to this hero already make him broken. He thinks that Death Pact is just a broken ability. He thinks that Skeleton Walk gives too much move speed. He thinks that Searing Arrows does too much damage. This hero just does way too much damage and has way too much HP, basically. And I think it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I think that's enough to win you a ton of games. Even when they do nerf it, it's not going to be enough because it's so overtuned that the win rate is way too high. Hello friends, I want to make an announcement here at the end of the video saying that this video is sponsored by Pro Guides, which I do really appreciate. The announcement is not the sponsorship or anything like that. It's that the Garbage Bin Hobos have actually, I did go to the doctor because of the hornet stings, and the Garbage Bin Hobos, one of their brothers is actually the doctor. And so the ointment for the hornet stings gave me serious rash, serious illness coming out on my skin. And so it's very expensive. It's very expensive to get treatment for that. And it's all from the hornet stings. It's really all from the pizza crust. That's where it stems from. So if you could go ahead and go to proguides.com, I do have classes every Tuesday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Here's one of them right here. So you can catch me on there. We can play together, and then Pro Guides will keep basically buying me dominoes, which would be really great because my doctor is and the hobos are giving me serious issues right now. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you guys, and I hope to see you in another video.